Small matter to me is silly, so full of gratitude. Yes, man, but counting your money. That so much that you deserve this praise. It is that spirit. He has the power to make us happy or unhappy, to make work a pleasure or a toil. Say that his power lies in words and looks, in things impossible to add and count them up. What then? The happiness he gives is quiet, as great as if it cost a fortune. Spirit removed me from his place. Haunt me no longer.
As he struggled with the spirit, he was conscious of being exhausted and overcome by an irresistible drowsiness, and further, of being in his own bedroom. He had barely time to reel to bed before he sank into a heavy sleep.
Ooh. Move. Get away from me. Get away from me. Get away from me. I'm not playing. Mr. Can you please be us? Can you please move him somewhere else? He keep talking and he keep listening while I'm trying to get this whole play.
Okay.
Hey, no more. No more.
When Scrooge awoke, the walls and ceiling were so hung with living green that it looked a perfect grove. The leaves of holly, mistletoe, and ivy reflected back the light, and such a mighty blaze went roaring up the chimney. Heaped upon the floor, to form a kind of throne, were turkeys, geese, great joints of meat, pigs, long wreaths of sausages, mince pies, plum puddings, barrels of oysters, red-hot chestnuts, cherry-cheeked apples, juicy oranges, luscious pears, great bowls of punch, and immense 12 cakes. Upon this couch there sat a giant, glorious to see, who bore a glowing torch. Scrooge did as he was told and held it fast. The room and its contents all vanished instantly, and they stood in the city streets upon a snowy Christmas morning. Scrooge and the ghost passed on, invisible, straight to Scrooge's clerk's house, and on the threshold of the door the spirit smiled, and stopped to bless Bob Cratchit's dwelling with the sprinklings of his torch. Then up rose Mrs. Cratchit.
What has ever got your precious father then and your brother Tiny Tim?
No, there's father coming.
Cried the two young Cratchits, who were everywhere at once. And in came Bob, the father, his threadbare clothes darned up and brushed to look seasonable, and Tiny Tim at his side. Alas for poor Tiny Tim. He bore a little crutch and had his limbs supported by an iron frame.
And how did little Tim behave?
As good as gold and better. Somehow he gets thoughtful, sitting by himself so much, and thinks the strangest things you've ever heard. He told me coming home that he hoped the people saw him in church because he was a cripple, and it might be pleasant to remember upon the Christmas day who made lame beggars walk and blind men see.
Master Peter and the two young Cratchits went to fetch the goose, which they soon returned in high procession. Mrs. Cratchit made the gravy, ready beforehand in a little saucepan. Master Peter mashed the potatoes with incredible vigor. Miss Belinda sweetened the applesauce, and Martha dusted the hot plates. Bob took Tiny Tim beside him in a tiny corner at the table. The two young Cratchits set chairs for everyone, not forgetting themselves. At last the dishes were set, and the grace was said. It was succeeded slowly by a breathless pause, as Mrs. Cratchit, looking slowly all along her carving knife, prepared to plunge it into the beast. And when she did, and the long-expected gush of stuffing issued forth, one murmur of delight arose all around the board. And even Tiny Tim, excited by the younger Cratchits, beat on the table with the handle of his knife and feebly cried,
Hurrah!
But now, the plates being changed by Miss Belinda, Mrs. Cratchit left the room alone to take the pudding up and bring it in. Mrs. Cratchit entered, smiling proudly, with the pudding like a speckled cannonball, so hard and firm, blazing in half of a quarter of ignited brandy, and topped with Christmas holly.
Oh, a wonderful pudding.
At last the dinner was all done. The cloth was cleared, the hearth was swept, and the fire made up. Then all the Cratchit family drew round the hearth, while the chestnuts on the fire sputtered and crackled noisily. They were happy, grateful, and pleased with one another, contented with the time. Around the fire. And when they faded and looked happier yet in the bright sprinklings of the spirit's torch at parting, Scrooge had his eye on them, and especially on Tiny Tim, until the very last. But the whole scene passed off, and he and the spirit were upon their travels again. Much they saw, and far they went, and many homes they visited, but always with a happy end. Suddenly, as they stood together in an open place, the bell struck 12. Mr. Scrooge looked about him for the ghost, but saw it no more. As the last stroke ceased to vibrate, he remembered the prediction of old dead Jacob Marley, and lifting up his eyes, beheld a solemn phantom. Draped and hooded, it came along the ground like a mist towards Scrooge.
Ghost of the future.
Wait, no. Start that instead. Scene change.
future. I fear you more than any. Spectre, I have seen. Will you not speak to me?
It gave him no reply, merely pointed its hand straight before them.
Lead on. Lead on. The night is wanting faster, and it is Spectre time to me. I know. Lead on, spirit.
They scarcely seemed to enter the city, for the city rather seemed to spring up about them. But there they were, in the heart of it amongst the merchants.
When did he die?
Last night, please.
What has he done with his money?
I have heard company. Perhaps he hasn't let it to. That's all I know.
The scene had changed again, and now he touched a bare, uncurtained bed. A pale light rising in the outer air fell straight upon this bed, and on it, unwatched, unwept, and uncared for, was the draped body of this unknown man.
What? Oh, spirit, let me see some tenderness connected with the death or this darkness. Chamber will forever be present to me.